One of the hallmarks of the human experience is the fear of the finite, the realization that what's present will soon become past, what's here will soon be gone, and well, you get the drift. The feeling of when the streetlights are about to come on as a kid, and the realization that you won't be here forever, and what will last is what you leave behind when you're gone. I've never had this feeling more while playing through a video game than while playing through Borderlands 4. This isn't to say I didn't enjoy it or think it's a bad game. That's 100% not the case. I had a great time with it. No, it's that it confirms something that's been lurking in the back of my mind for a while, and that's that the Borderlands series is dead. Or at least the idea of what the Borderlands series was to me was dead. Now, originally when I made my video essays on the Borderlands series, I planned on ending it off with the Borderlands movie, but it didn't really feel right with Borderlands 4 around the corner when I started working on the video, and I figured I'd give Gearbox one more chance to course correct since I'm definitely not the first, and certainly won't be the last to raise my opinion that the direction of the series has taken since its conception, which Gearbox should be more than familiar with at this point. This video won't be a full analysis of the game and story, because it would take away from the main point that I'm making. I want this video to be more of a conclusion of my thoughts on what were the important aspects I viewed as essential to the Borderlands series, compared to what the series became, compared to how they're addressed in the most recent installation of the series. So, get your existential dread hat on, and let's talk about Borderlands 4. In covering this game, I'll be starting with the gameplay and the elements which I thought were pretty good and done well, moving to the and debatable depending on what you look for in games, ending with the bad and straight up unacceptable when it comes to gameplay, and edging you until the end with my thoughts on the story. The gameplay and new mechanics are easily the best part of the new Borderlands, and are usually the aspects of the game that the developers consistently manage to get right. I can gladly say that Borderlands 4 is not an exception to this. The movement with the sliding from Borderlands 3 with the addition of the double jumping, gliding, dodging, and grappling feels smooth and responsive, and gives you the most control over weaving in, out, and through combat than any other Borderlands title. The new gear slots include ordnances, rep kits, and enhancements in addition to the classic class mods, shields, and weapons. Ordnances have replaced grenade mods to include rocket launchers and Gatling guns in addition to grenades, as well as being on a cooldown rather than having a set amount of ammo. I personally found this to be a good change, since I never used rocket launchers in any previous Borderlands game and would just spam grenades in one fight rather than spacing them out and having them be a consistent mechanic of combat like is incentivized with ordnances. Rep kits act as a small heal mid-combat with some short-term buffs associated with them, such as decreased damage from attacks, lifesteal, or elemental immunity, among other things. Enhancements reward using specific manufacturers or guns with parts from other manufacturers, which is a new mechanic in the game, where you can have a Tediore gun that can switch elements with a Malawan underbarrel, a Jacob's gun with Atlas tracking darts, or a Vladoff gun with a Hyperion shield. While using the manufacturer in question, you get a set of buffs unique to those weapons. While this is really good from a gameplay perspective, where generally with certain builds and playstyles you'll gravitate towards certain manufacturers, it's a little jarring from a narrative perspective where these gameplay elements are never really addressed thematically. I wish it was incorporated a bit more into the story where it called you out more for fighting against blind corporate loyalty and authoritarian power structures indifferent to human life while utilizing those same means to your ends. There are genuinely some really interesting concepts that you can put into your story through gameplay. At what point are you using the system to change it versus just furthering that same system with a revolutionary branding flair? I wish narratively these mechanics were handled with a bit more self-awareness and the series tackled some of the higher concepts, but I feel like it's pretty agreed upon at this point that you can't really count on Borderlands anymore to deliver on those themes. Especially with the shameless money-grubbing tactics of Gearbox and 2K behind the scenes, undermining the message even if they did. The customization in this game is really good. You're constantly rewarded with new heads, outfits, and weapon skins for completing challenges and side quests, although they're a bit fewer and further between than I would have liked. The customization options look cool, but I don't think I'd go as far as saying any of them could be the standard look for the character, like the developers did. We'll get into it later, but there were some other elements that also undermine the customization system that they put into the game. Borderlands 4 by far has the most extensive build options in the entire series. Now your skill trees have skill trees, and honestly I think it almost borders on too much. Listen, call me Unk and take me out back behind the shed, but it seems like games nowadays always run under the assumption that more equals better. With how giant these skill trees are, it seems like the game assumes you'll be putting hundreds of hours into it, rather than the one, maybe two playthroughs that the average player will. In the endgame of older Borderlands titles, you would be through one whole skill tree and half of the way through another by the time you were at the final boss, generally giving you the gist of each character, requiring one or two playthroughs with each character to explore their kit and capabilities. In Borderlands 4, the same is true, but instead of for each character, it's for one of each character's skill trees. While augments to action skills were a great addition to the series, with the variety of builds existing among every character, it starts to undermine the identity of each class, where what each character excels in isn't as clear as it was in previous entries. I had more moments in this game than any other Borderlands game where I said to myself, man, this would be a really cool gun to use if I weren't running this particular build. With the exception of the min-max late game builds, previous games incentivized a just go with it kind of mentality, where getting a certain legendary or some other piece of unique gear would guide you towards other playstyles since your skills weren't as significant of a factor in your build, making the loot feel really good even if it wasn't optimal for your build. When the skills matter more, the loot matters less. Sometimes the lack of customization can make a character or run of the game feel more unique due to the trajectory of your gameplay being based on your loot and factors specific to your run rather than specific to your build. Now, obviously, if developers leaving a bit of slack in the proverbial gameplay experience leash isn't necessarily something you care about like I do, then this might not be such a big deal for you. But reviews are subjective, and if you find the same things that make me tick in video games are the same things for you, then the customization sides a bit on the too much end of things, especially for the size of the game. Speaking on the size of the game, this part of the review gets to the not great, bad, and blatantly unacceptable parts of the game. A trend I see in a lot of AAA games is the concept of superficial content, which is also present in Borderlands 4, mainly the side quests and open world. The obsession with open world is probably one of the bigger blights on the gaming industry at the moment, with that being used as a replacement for actually making a compact gameplay experience, and it ends up bloating the budget of every project it touches without anything significant being added. The point of open world games is to create an immersive experience. The reason why open world works so well with RPGs is because of how combat, and especially non-combat skills, interact with the world. Whether it be ingredients and monster organs used for their magical and alchemical properties, stealth and lockpicking to interact with criminal underworlds, and crafting and speech used to interact with the artisans and higher-ups of society, an open world makes sense because there's lore and world building used to make you feel like you're part of the universe and living within it, finding your place through the background you made for your character and the skills you possess. Side quests in these cases become essential to build out certain factions of the world and tell you more about the universe based on the way you interact with it. Then there's Borderlands 4, where you can help a self-conscious rocket AI launch and achieve their dream of being a full-fledged exploding missile. Yeah, did anyone ever think that it could be possible that Borderlands 2 succeeded despite the obnoxious humor and meme reference side quests instead of because of it? For every one that worked, there were like 9 others I chose to wipe from my memory rather than admit they ever existed in a game I enjoy. Anyway, an open world was just not necessary for this game, and didn't add anything interesting to the gameplay that couldn't be achieved through designing areas like in previous games. In fact, it'd probably be better since having self-contained areas makes each feel unique and lets the developers build out the lore of each section of the game, giving you a peek of what's important to the world for each area, rather than having it spread out through an entire open world. There's a reason you remember Firestone and not, what was the place that you met Russian again? The endgame in Borderlands 4 right now is not great. After I was done with the story, I thought I was missing something when I did the Ultimate Vault Hunter side quest, but nope. The endgame content after you beat it consists of Zane's firmware, which allows you to add certain modifiers onto your gear, adding another level of complexity to the loot grind, which is a pretty fun addition. Specialization points, which give you small buffs to round out your build, Maurice's Bounty, which allows you to buy legendary items, Moxie's Big Encore, which allows you to fight bosses again for loot, and, unfortunately, wildcard missions. Instead of having you do another run of the game, Wildcard missions have you replay certain sections, long dialogue pauses included, with probably some of the most annoying buffs possible on enemies. I had the wonderful luck of having every enemy spawn an exploding black hole on death, but I've also seen evidence of such exciting gameplay features as all enemies being invisible or only being able to be damaged by headshots. But I guess we can all just say skill issue rather than admit that it's possible for some mechanics to be added to games that just aren't fun. Beyond this, there just isn't really a significant endgame that kept me wanting to play. If I wasn't able to write it off on my taxes, I don't know if I'd really be able to justify the $70 price tag. It genuinely baffles me how each Borderlands game after 2 and the pre-sequel manages to create a worse UI than each previous entry to the point where it seems like it's almost a competition now. In Borderlands 4, the UI just feels so bad to use. It seems to be designed for PC use with none of the upsides. The menu is needlessly a mess, with your loot not really standing out from anything else, requiring the game to have to add in filters for your inventory. This is exceptionally noticeable when you go to the customization tab and it's not organized by which skins you've unlocked first and what you've unlocked not being distinct from everything else, causing you to have to spend longer than you'd like selecting a skin for your gun. The alert spam also goes into every part of your inventory, which I don't think anyone actually asked for besides a clear all alert symbols button, which they obviously did not include. Small quality of life aspects are also missing, such as being able to drag a weapon to another slot, or to click on one gun, then click on another to swap the slots they're in. You also aren't able to hold left click on a fast travel location either, but have to press the specific button the game tells you to. I guess I don't know what the problem was with the Borderlands 2 inventory system. It seemed to work pretty well to organize loot, was visually distinct at first glance, and also showed off your character so you can appreciate your equipped skins, and it felt like you weren't taken out of the game in its entirety. This UI feels amateur and adds an extremely unnecessary amount of inventory management that they have already figured out how to bypass in previous entries of the series. I don't know when this happened, but at some point it became acceptable for multi-million-dollar AAA projects to perform like they were being run on a TI-84 at launch, to which Gearbox had to put out a day one patch instead of actually, optimizing their game properly before launch. I saw articles of people struggling to get 60 FPS while running a 5090 in their rig, which is completely unacceptable, especially while compiling shaders will be the two words you will see together the most throughout your entire playthrough. I already went on my rant about Randy Pitchford, so you can pause the video to read his tweet, but I'm kind of just over at this point, when literally all he had to say was, "Yep, we're aware of it and working on it, actual man-child." At least Bobby Kotick, as evil as he is, gets a modicum of respect from me for knowing when to shut the fuck up and stick to the shadows because he knows everyone hates him, and that isn't changing anytime soon. As opposed to Randy Pitchford, who still seems like he's desperately trying to be liked. This part contains some spoilers, so watch at your own risk, but I'll put a warning ahead of when I'm about to talk about certain significant events in the game I have a problem with. Borderlands 4 follows the 4 Vault Hunters Vex, Eamon, Harlow, and Rafa, fighting against the Timekeeper, an authoritarian who rules Kairos with an iron fist. The game does a great job of establishing the character. He kills all of the prisoners you attempt to save to break down your hope of escape, only to at the end possess your character to try to kill the person responsible for rescuing you, with the character in question saving you by relinquishing his own ability to resist possession, to which the Timekeeper then has him stab himself in the chest. This intro sequence is genuinely excellent for establishing the Timekeeper as a villain who rewards loyalty and harshly and disproportionately punishes those who oppose him. He constantly makes it a point that it is useless and futile to ever resist him. After this point though, it doesn't really feel like the Timekeeper is too present in the story, with the game having you fight off the 3 generals before fighting the final area, which was a bit disappointing because I really think they could have done so much more with this villain. This game still does a much better job at pretty much every aspect of the story than Borderlands 3. However, that's not really saying anything because I could also say the same thing about half of Adam Sandler's filmography. But Borderlands 4 does manage to tone down the bad aspects of the series' writing. While there are a few obnoxious characters, the writers at least make an attempt at making them likable, which they do alright at. I really like the interactions between Zane and Amara, with the two of them genuinely seeming like they were close allies and fought side by side together. With the exception of the side quests, there really wasn't too much of the writing that I rolled my eyes at, but there wasn't really anything beyond the introduction of the game that managed to catch my attention either. So this part is spoiler territory, so I'll add the timestamps to where it ends, so don't say I didn't warn you. 3, 2, 1. There were a couple things that annoyed me about the story. The first was Zadra's death, which seemed incredibly forced. Throughout the entire game, they make it a point that she is incredibly intelligent and created the technology that the Timekeeper uses to hold power. But as soon as your Echo 4 is fried, she doesn't realize you've been possessed by the Timekeeper, which is the #1 character who should have noticed. It'd be one thing if she pretended to not know you were possessed and tried to outsmart the Timekeeper and failed, but she just doesn't realize how her own technology works. The finale to the game was also pretty anticlimactic and ended very abruptly without too much of a buildup. In the phase, they just kind of forgot about expanding on that too. All in all, the story was okay, but it won't really get you interested in the universe like 1 or 2 did. There was a bit of an empty feeling that I had after I finished Borderlands 4, and that was that I realized that the series, or at least the idea of what the series was dead to me. With the state of events in the world, I think it's really easy to look back at certain video games with rose-tinted glasses and remember times when we had less responsibilities, had the potential to be anything, do anything. But as life goes on, reality starts looking more and more bleak, with responsible decisions and realistic outlooks starting to take over our lives. There was a recent song released by my favorite band, A Day to Remember, called Feedback. This song details frontman Jeremy McKinnon's frustrations with people's disapproval of the direction that was being taken with the band, with them trying out new ways to express themselves in their music and not necessarily doing the thing that they always did before. Hence the line, "Strike a chord, I don't play no more." But it highlights the fundamental idea that is it really art if you do the same thing over and over and over again for other people when your heart, mind, body, and soul are telling you to do something else? If people grow and evolve, it should be expected that their art will change with that too, and can't appeal to our sensibilities 100% of the time. With people from Borderlands 1 and 2 leaving Gearbox or getting promoted to executive positions, it should be expected that the series and its direction will change with that. I just won't be a part of that anymore, and there won't be another experience just like Borderlands 1 or 2. But that's okay. It made me realize I've changed too. The satisfaction from the loot grinds I liked from previous entries has been replaced by MMOs and the feeling that you get when you finish making a video. There are so many other interesting RPG games with great lore, worlds, and more gameplay elements to interact with all of it. And the feeling of every run being unique and having its own build and direction you didn't expect has been filled by so many amazing roguelikes that exist out there nowadays. Everything that I liked about Borderlands, I feel like other games just do them better now, even if you account for it being an all-in-one package. The idea of an RPG looter shooter just isn't unique anymore. In fact, it's starting to be the standard. There are a couple ideas from Borderlands that still live on now in other games. The series drilled the loot progression colors and their respective beams into all of our heads and normalized the criticism of corporate greed and how the pursuit of money at all costs inherently cheapens human life. But I think now it's time for me to say goodbye to Borderlands, and that sometimes it's better to say goodbye, let go, and appreciate all of the fun times you had, rather than hold resentment over things you can't control. It's best to live in the present, chase your dreams, and quit chasing the past, and take all the things you've learned along the way with you in your future adventures.